हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू इंग्लिश विद एवलिन। और आज हम करने वाले हैं एलिजाबेथन एज। और आप सोचेंगे कि अब हमने कैसे लिटरेचर में शुरू कर दिया है, क्योंकि हम लिटरेचर का मैं आपको हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंग्लिश लिटरेचर बता चुकी हूँ, कुछ पोएट्स भी हम कर चुके हैं। लेकिन अब हम एलिजाबेथन एज इसलिए कर रहे हैं क्योंकि एलिजाबेथन एज बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट एज है। और whoever is a student of literature or a researcher, they know that Elizabethan age is the golden age of literature, and Elizabethan age has continued to and continue it continued to influence the poets and writers coming in the later eras as well, and even till today. Okay, so today in this video we will study the social, political and religious background of the Elizabethan age. ये समझना इसलिए ज़रूरी है क्योंकि जब हमको ये बैकग्राउंड पता होगा तब हम अच्छे से समझ पाएंगे कि क्यों ये जो लिटरेचर था ये इतना इतना इम्पोर्टेंट क्यों था, या जो इस लिटरेचर का जो कैरेक्टर है वो ऐसा क्यों था, या क्यों ये लिटरेचर इतना वास्ट था, क्यों इतने सारे पोएट्स और ड्रामेटिस्ट्स इस एरा में आए, क्या ख़ास था एलिज़ाबेथ के रूल में और एलिज़ाबेथ द फर्स्ट की एरा में। तो सबसे पहले क्या था इसमें, इसकी एक पॉलिटिकल समरी हम समझते हैं। एलिज़ाबेथ के एज में बहुत ज़्यादा स्टेबिलिटी थी। एलिज़ाबेथ वॉज अ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग, एलिज़ाबेथ द फर्स्ट वॉज अ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग क्वीन। ओके, देर वॉज नो कन्फ्यूजन, देर वॉज नो रिलीजियस टर्मोइल, देर वर नो वॉर्स। ओके, so because of this there was a sense of prevailing peace and contentment among people. So after the reign of Edward and Mary, okay, which was not a peaceful reign, the coming of Elizabeth as a popular sovereign, it is like what people describe as, the researchers describe it as sunrise after a long night. This you can imagine how oppressed the people were before this, and how happy and satisfied they must have been after the accession, um, or the succession of the throne by Elizabeth. Now, in Milton's word, Milton says that we suddenly see England a noble and person nation, rousing herself like a strong man after sleep. So you could see that England was in its glory. It was powerful, it was glorious, and it was peaceful. Okay, the best time for any nation. Now, if we look at Elizabeth the First as a person, there are a lot of um people, okay, who would say, and it is agreed upon, also by historians, that she was vain and she was inconsistent in a lot of theory, in her policies. But there was one thing which she was consistent in, and that was her love for England and her desire to make England great. सो शी इंस्पायर्ड द पीपल हु वर अराउंड हर, जो आसपास जो लोग थे उनको भी उसने इतना पेट्रियाटिज्म से भर दिया था। देखो, व्हाट हैपेंस इज, इफ योर रूलर इज स्ट्रॉन्ग, इफ योर किंग इज able to give you a peaceful life without any fear of where my next meal is going to come from, and is progressive also. So this makes anyone indebted, to the king and to the nation, right? And this is why the works of the poets in this era, like Edwin Spencer's Fairy Queen or Shakespeare's works, they are, overflowing with this sense of patriotism. And under her administration, the English national life progressed by gigantic leaps, and not the small steps that were uh, characteristic of the development of England before this. and English literature reached the highest point of its development. Now, what are the characteristics of Elizabethan age? How do we differentiate the age of Elizabeth from the age of Edward and Mary before her, and the Restoration and Puritan age later, that came later? Now, the most important characteristic features of this age was uh, religious tolerance. The religious tolerance, in what sense? Everyone was Christian, but then Christianity was divided into two major sects, which was Protestants and the Roman Catholics. Now, earlier there were only Roman Catholics, but after the Reformation, okay, there was this new sect, Protestants, who had protested against the conservatism of the Roman Catholic religion. They had come up. Now these people were also Christians, but then there were a lot of uh, you know fundamental differences between these two religions, and because of this, um, there were a lot of religious conflicts. Okay, but in the age of Elizabeth, there was comparative religious tolerance. And the frightful excesses of the religious war, known as the 30 Years' War on the continent, found no parallel in England. That means in the continent, in Europe, this struggle was going on, but there was no such struggle in England. And Elizabeth found the whole kingdom divided against itself when Elizabeth came to the throne. Okay, but she took a wise decision. The north was largely Catholic, the southern countries were Protestant, Scotland was following the Reformation, and Protestants were in majority in Scotland, whereas Ireland wanted to remain true to the old religious traditions, and they were Catholics. So there was an open rivalry and rebellion, between Scotland and Ireland. That is, the northern parts of the country and the southern parts, right? But Elizabeth did not take sides. Okay, Elizabeth did not add fuel to this fire. She favored both the religious parties, Catholics and the Protestants, and they acted together in the favor of the country, and they were her trusted counselors. Okay, the defeat of the Spanish Armada also established the Reformation in England. Okay, the Spanish Armada was the Spanish Navy, and the Spanish Armada was defeated by England, which was a very important step in the glory of England in establishing England as the powerful nation in the region. Now, what happened because of Reformation? See, because of Reformation, people became free from the fear of religion. Before this, people were not free to think, you know, whatever they wanted to think. Like, there was no freedom. The church or the papacy, they they were involved with everything. Okay, and they did not let people think clearly. They persecuted the scientists, right? They did not let people free themselves from the clutches of religion. They did not let people, be free from the religious dogmas. But with the coming of Reformation, people, if someone wanted to believe in God, they could believe. They could, live with their belief. But if anyone wanted, to think of nature as the deity, they could do that, right? If anyone wanted to believe that, the earth is round, they could do that. If the people wanted to believe that there is no heaven or hell, they could do that, right? So with Reformation came this new age and era of new intellectual pursuits, new ideas, new theories, right? And people were free from the religious fears. So this helped immensely in the development of science and technology. And this development in science and technology took England ahead by leaps and bounds. So, again, coming to the social contentment, like now, if there is religious tolerance, if there is peace, there are no wars, ongoing wars with other countries. So, this was an era of social contentment. Okay, there was, uh, this was the era of machines, also the introduction of machines and industries, and because of this, a lot of inventions were taking place, manufacturing was taking place, and people were getting employment. People were not starving as in the previous era. And because of this increasing trade, the merchant class was becoming very important. They were becoming very rich. Because of this increasing trade, the the common man was becoming more and more satisfied because he was getting richer, and that huge gap between the rich and the poor, that was closing, right? The increase of wealth, the improvement in living, the opportunities of labor, that means work, and the newfound social content, these, because of all this, people could think about literary pursuits. Okay, so this was one important point. Now, because England had a very good navy, England had a lot of goods now to uh, to to export in the sense, to sell to other people, right? So there was this age of, or this spirit of adventure that was coming on. People wanted to explore, you know other lands, and when and and the riches which are found in other lands, because see, uh, the travelers were coming, people had started traveling, people had started traveling across continents, and news about rich countries, rich places, uh, different, the exotic east, all this was coming to the Englishman. And England was filled, by a spirit of adventure at that time. So it was an age of dreams, of adventure, unbounded enthusiasm springing from the new lands of fabulous riches revealed by English explorers. So the English explorers were going abroad, bringing news of how rich the people are. Okay. The young philosopher Bacon is saying confidently, I have taken all knowledge for my province. The mind must search farther than the eye. With the new rich lands opened to the sight, the imagination must create new forms to people the new worlds. Okay. And then people had started writing travelogues, diaries. There was an account of voyages, collection of voyages, okay, which was stimulating the English imagination. Now, people who are not going on these explorations, they were bringing back news. They were writing about it. Okay, when they were writing about it, the poets, okay, are creating. They are taking inspiration from there, and they are creating works that are young forever. And Marston writes. What does he write? He's giving an account of what the explorers have seen in the other lands. They say, why, man, all that dripping pans are pure gold. The prisoners they take are fettered in gold. Fettered means, tied in the chains. The chains, even the chains that the prisoners are tied in, are made of gold. And as for rubies and diamonds, they go forth on holidays and gather them by the seashore to hang on to their children's coats. Like we go on holidays and we collect seashells, from the shores. They say they collect rubies and diamonds, and they hang on their children's coats. That means, even the children's coats are adorned with rubies. This is how these people were describing the wealth that they were seeing in other lands. And this is how uh, the literature, it was creating a heaven to match these riches, this rich adventures, these rich accounts. Now, with this, with the Reformation, came the Renaissance movement also. Now, Reformation was a religious movement, okay, where people had broken away from the dogmas, okay, from the conservative nature of religion, right? They did not do away with religion completely, but they formed a different sect, saying that, you know, uh, that we do not have to be afraid of science. We do not have to be afraid of the new learning, of the new knowledge that we can find in the world, right? That is not against religion. This is what they were finding. So that gave way to science, that also gave way to a cultural and artistic movement. और ये जो cultural और artistic movement था, इसी को रेनेसा movement कहते हैं. This is the Renaissance movement. और कब आया ये Renaissance movement? Early 16th century to the early 17th century. और ये आया कहाँ से? यूरोप से, from Italy. It arose in Italy in the 14th century. Okay? जब हम Renaissance painters की बात करते हैं, ठीक है, तो वहीं से ये ट्रैवल होकर के रेनेसा मूवमेंट इंग्लैंड में आया, और इसको हम द एज ऑफ शेक्सपियर और द एलिजाबेथन एरा भी कहते हैं, ठीक है. नाउ टू सम अप, द एलिजाबेथन एज was a time of intellectual liberty. People were free to think, to philosophize, to express their views, to write their views, to share their views, to experiment with poetry and drama of all kinds, to experiment with the concept of religion and God. ठीक है. Apart from this, the gap between the classes was narrowing. ठीक है. There is unbounded patriotism. There is peace at home, in the people. Home in love within the country. And abroad, that means out of the country also. There were no wars, ongoing wars. Okay? And this age, Elizabethan age, you can compare it to, किससे compare कर सकते हैं? Age of Pericles in Athens, Augustus in Rome. Or if you fast forward to about 50 years later, the age of Louis the 14th in France. और क्यों लुई द 14th क्या की स्पेशली बात करते हैं कि जो 50 साल पहले, 50 years पहले शेक्सपियर, मार्लो और बेन जॉनसन ने ड्रामा को दिया था इन इंग्लैंड, वो 50 years बाद में कॉर्निए, रेसिन एंड मोरलिए दे गेव टू फ्रांस in the form of the golden age of drama in France. इसलिए इनको कंपेयर किया गया है. तो एज ऑफ पेरिक्लिस एंड एथेंस एंड ऑगस्टस एंड रोम तो पहले के हैं, लेकिन जो लुई द 14th की एज है ये आती है बाद में, बट इट इज स्टिल कंपेरेबल, ओके, बिकॉज ऑफ द गोल्डन एज, द ग्लोरियस एज ऑफ ड्रामा. ठीक है. सो विद दिस वी हैव कवर्ड द एरा ऑफ एलिजाबेथ, the Elizabethan age, the Shakespearean era, the political and religious background. ठीक है. क्योंकि जो भी पोएट और ड्रामेटिस्ट हैं वो ड्रॉ कहाँ से करते हैं, इंस्पिरेशन कहाँ से लेते हैं, उनका कंटेंट क्या होता है, उनका बैकग्राउंड क्या होता है, ये जानना बहुत ज़रूरी होता है. अगर हम ये जान लेंगे तो हम जो लिटरेचर का जो फ्लेवर है उस एरा को, उसको हम अच्छी तरह से समझ पाएंगे. ठीक है. So with this we come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and after this I am going to bring on and off, in between I'm going to come up with videos on the various poets and dramatists of the Elizabethan age. Once we do this, we'll begin with the later eras in literature. So I hope this has been useful. Thank you so much. Bye bye.